Welcome to Frema Audiobooks, where your financial intelligence expands, your investing mindset evolves, and your long-term wealth strategy becomes grounded in clarity, confidence, and unstoppable future readiness as we explore the future-proof portfolio. Investments that win long-term, a guide designed to show you how to build a portfolio that survives volatility, thrives through uncertainty, and grows stronger in every financial season. You will learn how to identify assets built for resilience rather than hype. You will understand the principles that keep wealth expanding despite economic shifts. You will discover how future-focused investing protects your money from inflation, disruption, and global change. You will rise into the mindset of someone who builds wealth not for quick wins, but for lasting stability. You will elevate your vision as you learn how diversified, well-structured, data-informed portfolios outperform chance and emotion. You will gain clarity on how long-term assets deliver reliability, even when the world moves unpredictably. You will understand how quality, sustainability, and strategic allocation create a portfolio that keeps winning for decades. You will develop the strength to ignore noise and chase only what compounds, strengthens, and endures. You will gain confidence as you learn the foundations of generational investing. You will awaken a new identity built on intelligence instead of impulse. You will realize that your future wealth depends on what you build today. You will see how your future-proof portfolio becomes your greatest financial shield. You will anchor yourself in principles that help you outlast markets, trends, and uncertainty. And before we begin this powerful journey, make sure you subscribe to Frema Audiobooks. Like this video, comment your long-term investing goal, and share this audiobook with someone committed to building wealth that lasts, because today you begin constructing a future-proof portfolio designed to win for a lifetime. You begin building a future-proof portfolio when you understand that long-term investing is not about predicting the future, but preparing for it, because the strongest portfolios thrive through uncertainty instead of fearing it. You grow in clarity when you recognize that markets will rise, fall, and shift, yet disciplined investors still win. You elevate your confidence when you focus on principles rather than predictions. You gain emotional resilience when you accept that volatility is normal. You rise in intelligence when you understand that long-term wealth comes from strategic patience. You elevate your mindset when you stop chasing hype-based assets. You grow in maturity when you choose investments that survive economic storms. You gain foresight when you imagine your portfolio decades from now. You rise in identity when you call yourself a future-ready investor. You elevate your approach when you plan for many possible outcomes. You grow in capability when you diversify intentionally. You gain perspective when you focus on what endures, not what excites. You rise in strength when your portfolio is designed to adapt. You elevate your future when preparation becomes your investing habit. You win every day when you build for resilience instead of reaction. You elevate your future-proof portfolio when you learn the rule of investing in durable assets, because wealth grows consistently when it is rooted in high-quality investments that stand the test of time. You grow in intelligence when you seek assets with strong fundamentals. You elevate your judgment when you choose companies with long-term earnings potential. You gain clarity when you understand how durable assets outperform fads. You rise in foresight when you prioritize stability over excitement. You elevate your emotional strength when you trust long-term performance. You grow in discipline when you stop chasing speculative trends. You gain resilience when durable investments support you choose companies with long-term earnings potential. You gain clarity when you understand how durable assets outperform fads. You rise in foresight when you prioritize stability over excitement. You elevate your emotional strength when you trust long-term performance. You grow in discipline when you stop chasing speculative trends. You gain resilience when durable investments support your portfolio during downturns. You rise in identity when you think like someone building generational wealth. You elevate your capability when you select assets that reflect long-term reliability. You grow in confidence when you understand why durable assets rarely fail. You gain motivation when you see steady, predictable growth. You rise in vision when you analyze the future potential of each investment. You elevate your future when your foundation is built on durability. You win every day when strength, not hype, shapes your portfolio. You rise into long-term success when you adopt the rule of diversification, because spreading your investments protects you from single-point failures and increases your chances of winning across different economic environments. You grow in clarity when you understand that no single asset can guarantee security. You elevate your intelligence when you diversify across industries, geographies, and asset types. You gain stability when you balance your risk exposure. You rise in emotional peace when diversification reduces panic during market volatility. You elevate your capability when you build layers of protection into your portfolio. You grow in foresight when you consider how different sectors respond to economic changes. You gain strength when diversified investments smooth out performance. You rise in identity when you commit to structure rather than randomness. You elevate your discipline when diversification becomes intentional. You grow in perspective when you stop relying on one winner to carry everything. You gain resilience when losses in one area are cushioned by gains in another. You rise in maturity when you construct a balanced, future-ready blueprint. You elevate your future when diversification supports compounding. You win every day when balance becomes your greatest investment strategy. You elevate your future-proofing strategy when you understand the rule of investing in innovation, because the world is evolving faster than ever, and portfolios must adapt to long-term technological transformation. You grow in vision when you study industries shaping the next decades. You elevate your intelligence when you explore sectors like renewable energy, artificial intelligence, robotics, and biotechnology. You gain perspective when you understand where future value will be created. You rise in capability when you balance innovation with traditional stability. You elevate your confidence when you invest in industries with expanding global demand. You grow in foresight when you analyze trends rather than headlines. You gain emotional strength when you invest with a long view of technological change. You rise in identity when you think like a future-focused investor. You elevate your strategy when you combine innovation with fundamentals. You grow in maturity when you avoid hype and choose true disruptors. You gain momentum when innovation carries your portfolio forward. You rise in resilience when forward-looking assets protect your long-term vision. You elevate your future when innovation becomes part of your investing DNA. You win every day when you invest where the world is heading. You rise into stronger financial security when you adopt the rule of protecting your portfolio from risk, because safeguarding your investments ensures you stay in the game long enough to win big. You grow in intelligence when you understand the role of risk management. You elevate your judgment when you diversify across risk levels. You gain clarity when you set boundaries for maximum acceptable losses. You rise in capability when you use protective tools like asset allocation, stop-loss strategies, and emergency funds. You elevate your emotional peace when you prepare for volatility before it arrives. You grow in discipline when you refuse to gamble with your financial future. You gain resilience when protection becomes a built-in mindset. You rise in identity when you think like someone who values safety and longevity. You elevate your stability when risk reduction becomes part of your portfolio design. You grow in foresight when you evaluate potential downsides instead of just upsides. You gain confidence when your protection strategies strengthen your long-term plan. You rise in wisdom when you defend your assets with care. You elevate your future when risk management secures your growth. You win every day when protection keeps you future-proof. You elevate your long-term investment power when you understand the rule of allocating across time horizons, because a portfolio that wins decades into the future just serves your short-term needs, medium-term goals, and long-term vision simultaneously. You grow in clarity when you build layers of investments that mature at different times. You elevate your intelligence when you match your assets to your timeline. You gain stability when short-term challenges don't disrupt long-term plans. You rise in confidence when your portfolio supports all phases of your life. You elevate your foresight when you assign each investment a purpose based on time. You grow in emotional peace when your short-term reserves protect you from forced selling. You gain maturity when you structure your portfolio across multiple horizons. You rise in discipline when you avoid touching long-term investments prematurely. You elevate your capability when each time horizon strengthens the others. You grow in resilience when time allocation reduces stress. You gain identity when your planning reflects the mindset of a strategic long-term investor. You rise in purpose when your investments support your entire financial journey. You elevate your future when time-based allocation multiplies your financial security. You win every day when each time horizon works in harmony. You rise into future-proof investing when you learn the rule of embracing global diversification, because the strongest portfolios reach beyond borders and capture opportunities across the world. You grow in perspective when you recognize that growth is not limited to your home country. You elevate your intelligence when you explore international markets. You gain resilience when global exposure reduces regional risk. You rise in capability when you diversify across economic cycles and currencies. You elevate your judgment when you understand how emerging markets create long-term potential. You grow in clarity when you balance global expansion with domestic stability. You gain emotional confidence when you broaden your financial reach. You rise in identity when you think like a global investor. You elevate your foresight when you analyze macro trends shaping the world. You grow in maturity when you recognize how global diversification accelerates wealth. You gain opportunity when you include countries with strong demographic and economic futures. You rise in strategy when you position yourself for worldwide growth. You elevate your future when the world becomes part of your portfolio. You win every day when you invest beyond borders. You elevate your portfolio's long-term resilience when you understand the rule of investing in cash flowing assets, because steady cash flow provides stability, strength, and reinvestment opportunities, even during volatile periods. You grow in clarity when you recognize the power of dividends, rental income, and yields. You elevate your financial stability when cash flow cushions downturns. You gain momentum when passive income fuels reinvestment. You rise in identity when you think like someone who builds income instead of waiting for appreciation alone. You elevate your capability when you analyze the strength of different cash flow sources. You grow in foresight when you choose assets with predictable payouts. You gain emotional peace when cash flow offsets market volatility. You rise in maturity when sustainable income becomes part of your long-term design. You elevate your discipline when you reinvest cash flow for greater compounding. You grow in opportunity when income-producing assets provide flexibility. You gain strength when cash flow reduces financial pressure. You rise in vision when you see income as a foundation for generational wealth. You elevate your future when cash-flowing assets support both growth and security. You win every day when income strengthens your portfolio. You rise into strategic investing when you understand the rule of evaluating long-term trends, because predicting short-term movements is impossible, but identifying future megatrends is achievable and profitable. You grow in intelligence when you study demographic changes shaping global demand. You elevate your curiosity when you explore technological revolutions transforming industries. You gain capability when you analyze environmental and societal shifts. You rise in foresight when you focus on what will matter 10 years from now. You elevate your judgment when you distinguish real trends from temporary hype. You grow in wisdom when you invest in sectors with undeniable future relevance. You gain opportunity when you position yourself ahead of global transformation. You rise in emotional stability when long-term trends guide your allocation. You elevate your identity when you see yourself as a forward-thinking investor. You grow in clarity when you understand which themes will dominate the next decade. You gain resilience when your portfolio prepares for the future instead of reacting to it. You rise in capability when trend analysis strengthens your decisions. You elevate your future when megatrends fuel your long-term success. You win every day when you invest with vision, not reaction. You elevate your financial stability when you understand the rule of maintaining liquidity, because a future-proof portfolio must allow you to access cash without disrupting long-term investments. You grow in control when you build an emergency fund outside your portfolio. You elevate your emotional strength when liquidity prevents forced selling. You gain clarity when you know exactly how much cash you need for safety. You rise in maturity when you avoid draining long-term holdings for short-term needs. You elevate your discipline when you structure your finances to protect compounding. You grow in foresight when you plan for unexpected expenses. You gain resilience when liquidity supports your mental peace. You rise in identity when you think like someone protecting their long-term strategy. You elevate your capability when you use liquidity to navigate market uncertainty. You grow in stability when cash reserves strengthen your confidence. You gain opportunity when liquidity allows strategic buying. During downturns, you rise in intelligence when liquidity becomes part of your risk management. You elevate your future when you secure both flexibility and growth. You win every day when liquidity keeps your portfolio future-proof. You elevate your investing mastery when you understand the rule of balancing growth and stability, because a future-proof portfolio needs assets that expand aggressively while others protect your foundation. You grow in wisdom when you learn to weigh potential return against potential risk. You elevate your discipline when you resist allocating too heavily toward aggressive assets. You gain clarity when you diversify between growth stocks, value stocks, bonds, and real estate. You rise in emotional strength when you understand how balance shields you from volatility. You elevate your intelligence when you learn that stability enables longevity. You grow in identity when you think like a strategist rather than a gambler. You gain confidence when balanced allocation anchors your long-term plan. You rise in maturity when you welcome both secure and high-potential investments. You elevate your capability when you experiment within safe boundaries. You grow in foresight when you understand the purpose each asset serves. You gain perspective when you embrace both security and opportunity. You rise in resilience when your downside is protected. You elevate your future when balanced investing becomes your foundation. You win every day when your portfolio grows steadily and safely. You rise into advanced future-proof thinking when you understand the rule of adapting your portfolio as life evolves, because your financial needs, goals, and responsibilities shift over time. You grow in self-awareness when you review your portfolio annually. You elevate your clarity when you adjust your allocations to match your current phase of life. You gain control when you update your strategies as your income, family, and priorities change. You rise in maturity when you accept that your portfolio should grow with you. You elevate your capability when you stay flexible rather than rigid. You grow in emotional intelligence when you adapt without fear. You gain confidence when updating your portfolio feels empowering, not stressful. You rise in foresight when you evolve your strategy with new information. You elevate your identity when you behave like a lifelong investor. You grow in wisdom when you let your portfolio reflect your evolving ambitions. You gain resilience when changes strengthen your long-term outlook. You rise in strategy when you adjust while staying aligned with long-term goals. You elevate your future when flexibility becomes your advantage. You win every day when adaptation keeps your portfolio relevant. You elevate your foundation for long-term success when you understand the rule of minimizing emotional decision-making, because the greatest threat to a future-proof portfolio is the investor's own impulses. You grow in emotional strength when you avoid buying from greed. You elevate your discipline when you refuse to sell from fear. You gain clarity when you separate market noise from genuine long-term signals. You rise in capability when you develop a steady investing mindset. You elevate your confidence when you understand market cycles. You grow in resilience when temporary losses no longer break your resolve. You gain maturity when you learn the difference between reacting and responding. You rise in wisdom when you observe before acting. You elevate your identity when you behave like a seasoned, future-focused investor. You grow in stability when emotional discipline protects your compounding. You gain foresight when you recognize how emotional mistakes destroy long-term returns. You rise in intelligence when your decisions become data-driven. You elevate your future when emotions stop controlling your strategy. You win every day when your discipline outperforms your emotions. You rise into stronger financial security when you understand the rule of protecting your portfolio from inflation, because rising costs silently weaken your purchasing power if your investments aren't built to outpace it. You grow in awareness when you learn which assets historically beat inflation. You elevate your intelligence when you study commodities, real estate, energy, and inflation-protected bonds. You gain clarity when you understand how inflation affects long-term performance. You rise in capability when you diversify into assets that grow with rising prices. You elevate your foresight when you incorporate inflation-resistant sectors into your plan. You grow in emotional peace when you know your portfolio is shielded from future uncertainty. You gain resilience when inflation no longer threatens your goals. You rise in maturity when you prepare instead of react. You elevate your identity when you think like someone who anticipates economic shifts. You grow in security when you defend your purchasing power. You gain momentum when inflation-protected assets strengthen your compounding. You rise in discipline when you treat inflation as part of your strategy. You elevate your future when your portfolio grows faster than rising costs. You win every day when inflation becomes a manageable factor rather than a fear. You elevate your future-ready intelligence when you understand the rule of evaluating economic cycles, because knowing where you are in the cycle helps you strengthen your strategy without trying to predict the unpredictable. You grow in wisdom when you study how markets move through expansion and contraction. You elevate your clarity when you understand the difference between short-term corrections and long-term cycles. You gain insight when you analyze leading indicators like employment, interest rates, and GDP. You rise in emotional peace when you accept that cycles are natural. You elevate your strategy when you adjust your expectations based on the stage of the cycle. You grow in resilience when you remain committed through downturns. You gain confidence when cycles no longer intimidate. You rise in foresight when you prepare your portfolio for multiple scenarios. You elevate your capability when you analyze long-term historical patterns. You grow in discipline when you stop trying to time the market. You gain stability when cycles strengthen your strategy instead of weakening it. You rise in maturity when you embrace the long-term nature of economic movements. You elevate your future when cycle awareness supports smarter decisions. You win every day when you build wealth that survives every economic season. You strengthen your future-proof strategy when you learn how to read technological shifts, because every major economic transformation is born from innovation that reshapes industries and redefines what becomes valuable. You grow in insight when you observe which technologies are gaining adoption rather than hype. You gain strategic advantage when you understand why some innovations scale while others fade. You deepen your awareness when you study how technology influences global labor, productivity, and consumer behavior. You develop clarity when you identify which sectors will expand with automation and digitalization. You refine your judgment when you avoid chasing every new invention and instead invest in those with practical longevity. You sharpen your foresight when you track how governments and corporations adapt to technological disruption. You strengthen your intuition when you learn how innovation cycles create new winners and retire old ones. You become more intentional when you position your portfolio to benefit from long-term technological integration. You build resilience when you stop relying on luck and start relying on informed observation. You expand your vision when you examine how innovation impacts supply chains, energy systems, and communication networks. You grow in confidence when you can explain why a certain sector has long-term potential. You enhance your discipline when you avoid technology fads that disappear as quickly as they appear. You shape your identity as an investor who recognizes meaningful transformation. You secure your future when you align your investments with the technologies that will define the next several decades. You advance your portfolio's staying power when you understand how demographic changes influence long-term investment performance, because populations determine which industries rise and which ones decline. You build awareness when you notice how aging societies create demand for healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and retirement services. You deepen your understanding when you observe how young, fast-growing populations fuel industries like education, housing, and consumer goods. You gain a strategic edge when you analyze migration patterns and workforce trends. You grow in perspective when you recognize that demographic data predicts economic shifts more reliably than short-term news. You make smarter decisions when you invest in sectors aligned with population trends rather than temporary headlines. You strengthen your portfolio when you understand how generational wealth transfer reshapes financial markets. You become more accurate in your planning when you track how urbanization drives infrastructure and real estate growth. You elevate your judgment when you distinguish between temporary population dips and long-term demographic movement. You increase your confidence when you identify which regions will experience growth over the next 20 years. You enrich your insight when you see the connection between demographics and consumer behavior. You grow in intelligence when you analyze how aging affects interest rates, pensions, and government spending. You develop long-term clarity when you look at the population curve rather than the news cycle. You strengthen your resilience when you invest with demographic awareness. You win 4 decades when you let population trends guide your future forward allocation. You reinforce your long-term success when you understand how climate-related changes influence the global economy, because environmental shifts are shaping the industries, regulations, and innovations of the future. You gain maturity when you recognize that sustainability is not a trend but an unavoidable economic direction. You develop sharper judgment when you research which companies are adapting early. You increase your foresight when you consider how climate-related risks affect real estate, energy, and agriculture. You broaden your understanding when you observe how governments incentivize renewable solutions. You grow in resilience when you allocate to sectors that benefit from environmental adaptation rather than deteriorate from it. You create a smarter portfolio when you integrate clean energy, efficient technology, and resource-conscious companies. You strengthen your confidence when you recognize that preparedness is a form of protection. You become a more responsible investor when you consider the long-term stability of the planet alongside your financial goals. You gain greater awareness when you examine how supply chains are evolving due to climate concerns. You sharpen your analysis when you differentiate between companies making real progress and those using sustainability as marketing. You cultivate a stronger mindset when you view climate-ready investments as long-range opportunities. You elevate your intelligence when you see how environmental resilience enhances financial resilience. You grow in strategic depth when you prepare for the economic shifts caused by climate change. You solidify your portfolio when you invest with tomorrow's environmental reality in mind. You enhance your future-proof design when you understand that behavioral discipline is more important than intellectual knowledge, because even the smartest strategies fail when emotions overpower logic. You gain strength when you practice patience during volatile periods. You develop resilience when you learn to observe the market without reacting impulsively. You cultivate self-control when you resist the urge to abandon your strategy during downturns. You grow wiser when you recognize that most mistakes are emotional, not analytical. You improve your long-term results when you consistently follow your plan instead of improvising under pressure. You strengthen your foundation when you treat investing as a process, not a series of emotional reactions. You fortify your confidence when you separate your identity from temporary market movements. You expand your capability when you learn to pause before responding to uncertainty. You refresh your perspective when you remind yourself that long-term outcomes matter more than short-term discomfort. You build inner stability when you practice staying calm in unpredictable environments. You elevate your awareness when you monitor your emotional triggers. You transform your mindset when discipline becomes your default setting. You become a stronger investor when composure guides your decisions. You secure your future when discipline becomes your daily advantage. You build a powerful long-term portfolio when you understand how economic innovation cycles expand and contract, because recognizing these patterns allows you to position yourself intelligently rather than react defensively. You deepen your awareness when you learn how technological breakthroughs spark new investment opportunities. You sharpen your foresight when you study past economic revolutions from industrialization to the digital age to understand the present. You enhance your strategy when you recognize which sectors are entering growth phases and which are slowing down. You gain confidence when you can identify early signs of industry maturation. You strengthen your discipline when you avoid placing all your capital in outdated, declining sectors. You grow in vision when you position yourself to benefit from industries on the verge of expansion. You develop intelligence when you study how innovation impacts job markets, production methods, and consumer behavior. You expand your adaptability when you learn how economic cycles repeat across history. You evolve your perspective when you realize that disruption is a natural part of progress. You refine your judgment when you analyze how each cycle opens both opportunities and risks. You build resilience when you prepare for each phase rather than fear it. You increase your long-term returns when you align with industries set to dominate the future. You cultivate wisdom when you look beyond headlines and study deeper economic patterns. You future-proof your portfolio when you invest according to the cycles shaping the next generation of wealth. You strengthen your future-proof blueprint when you understand that your portfolio must evolve with shifting global power dynamics, because the flow of economic influence determines where opportunities emerge and where they fade. You expand your strategic awareness when you observe how rising nations reshape supply chains, trade agreements, and global investment patterns. You gain greater clarity when you track which countries are becoming innovation hubs. You refine your perspective when you study geopolitical alliances and their financial implications. You increase your resilience when you diversify across regions that balance each other's economic strengths. You sharpen your judgment when you avoid overexposure to any one nation's political risks. You broaden your opportunity set when you consider growth potential in emerging markets. You strengthen your foresight when you understand how demographic waves and economic reforms shape national prosperity. You elevate your skill set when you recognize early signs of global economic rotation. You build your confidence when you understand how interconnected the world economy has become. You grow more adaptable when you prepare your portfolio for shifting global influence. You enhance your intelligence when you analyze how nations compete and collaborate for economic dominance. You expand your long-term vision when you look beyond borders and into global transformation. You cultivate deeper insight when you see how geopolitical developments affect investment resilience. You unlock stronger future returns when your portfolio mirrors global evolution rather than resisting it. You advance your long-term success when you understand that adaptability is the core strength of a future-proof portfolio, because rigid strategies collapse in changing environments, while flexible ones thrive. You develop resilience when you accept that your investment approach must evolve with new information. You nurture your judgment when you revisit your financial assumptions annually. You enrich your understanding when you adjust allocations based on changing risk tolerance, income sources, and life responsibilities. You sharpen your strategic thinking when you evaluate whether each asset still serves your long-term purpose. You strengthen your emotional intelligence when you embrace re-evaluation without guilt or fear. You gain confidence when adaptation feels like refinement rather than instability. You deepen your skill set when you learn to tweak instead of overhaul your portfolio. You build long-lasting consistency when you allow your strategy to breathe and evolve. You expand your durability when you incorporate lessons learned from past market cycles. You refine your identity when you become an investor who adapts instead of reacts. You reinforce your resilience when your strategy adjusts rather than breaks during uncertainty. You elevate your decision-making when you adapt proactively rather than defensively. You grow in long-term strength when your portfolio remains aligned with your evolving life. You secure your financial future when adaptability becomes your core advantage. You enhance your wealth-building potential when you understand that long-term winners are built through boring, reliable behaviors repeated consistently, not through dramatic, impulsive choices. You expand your peace of mind when you stop chasing every new headline or trend. You refine your inner discipline when you lean on systems instead of emotions. You gain clarity when you prioritize timeless principles over temporary excitement. You strengthen your identity when consistency becomes more valuable to you than novelty. You deepen your intuition when you trust long-term frameworks instead of quick gains. You grow in quiet confidence when you recognize how powerful steady progress becomes over decades. You refine your strategy when your routine becomes predictable and stable. You cultivate maturity when you accept that wealth is built through structure, not adrenaline. You sharpen your decision-making when you rely on logic rather than mood. You reinforce your resilience when your habits protect you during chaotic markets. You rise into greater wisdom when you appreciate that the most successful portfolios rarely require daily excitement. You enrich your financial strength when you allow boredom to become a sign of discipline. You elevate your long-term outcomes when reliability becomes your compass. You future-proof your wealth when consistency replaces chaos. You expand your investing resilience when you understand how tax strategy influences long-term wealth, because what you keep matters far more than what you earn. You gain strategic clarity when you learn how tax-efficient accounts can accelerate your compounding. You refine your judgment when you understand how capital gains rates shape your decisions. You strengthen your capability when you place the right assets in the right accounts. You increase your foresight when you evaluate how taxes will affect your future withdrawals. You grow in discipline when you minimize unnecessary turnover that creates tax drag. You enhance your intelligence when you research how tax laws affect different asset classes. You develop stability when you hold investments long enough to benefit from lower tax rates. You build confidence when you understand how tax planning strengthens your financial longevity. You elevate your awareness when you see how subtle tax advantages create massive advantages across decades. You improve your strategic flexibility when you explore multiple tax-advantaged vehicles. You cultivate maturity when you treat taxes as a long-term planning tool instead of an annual annoyance. You sharpen your long-term focus when you recognize how taxes quietly shape portfolio outcomes. You elevate your wealth trajectory when tax-efficient choices amplify compounding. You win 4 decades when smart tax strategy becomes part of your investment identity. You elevate your long-term advantage when you understand that your portfolio grows stronger when you remove unnecessary complexity, because simplicity enhances clarity, consistency, and long-term execution. You reduce emotional friction when your strategy is easy to follow. You broaden your confidence when your portfolio becomes straightforward instead of chaotic. You increase your accuracy when your decisions are not clouded by too many moving parts. You deepen your discipline when you streamline your holdings. You gain more focus when simplicity reveals what truly drives your long-term results. You refine your judgment when you eliminate assets that no longer serve a purpose. You grow more stable when your portfolio structure becomes clean and intentional. You strengthen your adaptability when a simple design is easier to adjust. You improve your emotional awareness when you recognize how complexity breeds anxiety. You become more strategic when simplicity allows you to monitor performance clearly. You expand your capability when your portfolio becomes easier to manage. You rise in maturity when you choose clarity over complication. You reinforce your long-term vision when simplicity supports consistent contribution. You win continuously when a streamlined portfolio sharpens your future-proof strategy. You strengthen your long-term strategy when you understand that consistent contribution matters more than perfect timing, because steady inflows compound even when the markets move unpredictably. You gain confidence when you stop chasing exact entry points and instead prioritize reliability. You deepen your discipline when you treat investing like a monthly ritual rather than a guessing game. You build inner calm when you accept that timing rarely determines long-term success. You refine your understanding when you realize that consistency shields your wealth from emotional chaos. You gain confidence when you stop chasing exact entry points and instead prioritize reliability. You deepen your discipline when you treat investing like a monthly ritual rather than a guessing game. You build inner calm when you accept that timing rarely determines long-term success. You refine your understanding when you realize that consistency shields your wealth from emotional chaos. You develop that long-term investing rewards patience. You elevate your confidence when consistent action becomes part of your financial identity. You strengthen your strategy when you rely on process instead of prediction. You grow your wealth efficiently when small regular contributions accumulate more powerfully than sporadic large deposits. You refine your outlook when you embrace consistency as your strongest ally. You build a future-proof habit when you contribute with discipline rather than impulse. You advance your investing intelligence when you learn to separate useful data from distracting noise, because not all information deserves your attention or influences long-term success. You gain clarity when you stop reacting to every headline. You sharpen your focus when you distinguish between market news and market noise. You strengthen your strategy when you rely on research rather than speculation. You enhance your judgment when you develop a filter for relevance. You grow in emotional balance when you stop chasing short-term narratives. You build mental resilience when you recognize how sensational media distorts perspective. You refine your thinking when you value long-term trends more than daily fluctuations. You increase your confidence when you trust your own analysis. You expand your capability when you learn to interpret data through a long horizon lens. You deepen your identity as an investor who avoids unnecessary panic. You improve your consistency when you ignore distractions that cloud decision-making. You develop insight when you study fundamentals instead of hype. You elevate your future when you focus on information that shapes the next decade, not the next hour. You strengthen your long-term advantage when you silence the noise and amplify true knowledge. You reinforce your financial foundation when you structure your portfolio to withstand unexpected events, because surprise disruptions test the strength of your preparation. You cultivate foresight when You build buffers that protect your long-term assets. You develop emotional steadiness when you prepare for the unknown in advance. You gain stability when you maintain a liquidity cushion separate from your investments. You sharpen your strategic thinking when you imagine both optimistic and pessimistic scenarios. You increase your resilience when you diversify across industries with different sensitivities to crises. You strengthen your adaptability when you practice stress testing your portfolio. You enrich your insight when you analyze how past shocks influenced markets. You elevate your maturity when you stop expecting certainty and begin planning for unpredictability. You grow in discipline when you construct safeguards instead of hoping for smooth conditions. You deepen your identity as an investor who prepares thoughtfully. You refine your long-term approach when you adjust your portfolio to endure pressure. You gain confidence when you know uncertainty cannot dismantle your plan. You expand your readiness when your strategy includes contingencies. You secure your future when preparation makes you crisis-proof. You elevate your investment approach when you understand the importance of transparency within your portfolio, because knowing exactly what you own and why you own it prevents confusion and strengthens conviction. You build clarity when you maintain a documented purpose for each position. You enhance your discipline when you eliminate assets that no longer align with your strategy. You strengthen your understanding when you track how each investment contributes to your long-term vision. You expand your control when you avoid holding assets you cannot explain. You refine your confidence when your portfolio reflects deliberate choices rather than random accumulation. You grow in insight when you review your holdings with honesty. You cultivate consistency when you keep your portfolio clean and intentional. You increase your emotional stability when you understand the role each asset plays. You sharpen your decision-making when you separate essential holdings from distractions. You elevate your foresight when you clarify which investments deserve expansion and which deserve exit. You deepen your long-term strategy when you maintain transparency around risk, purpose, and potential. You develop maturity when you analyze performance through a thoughtful lens. You strengthen your resilience when clarity replaces confusion. You future-proof your wealth when transparency becomes part of your investing philosophy. You advance your future-proof portfolio when you adopt a mindset of lifelong learning, because the world changes too quickly for static knowledge to guarantee long-term success. You expand your adaptability when you remain curious about economic shifts. You deepen your strategic understanding when you explore how new technologies influence financial markets. You increase your resilience when you continually upgrade your financial literacy. You sharpen your long-term outlook when you embrace the value of learning from experts and historical patterns. You grow in confidence when knowledge reduces uncertainty. You strengthen your judgment when you understand how global events shape investment outcomes. You enhance your perspective when you study both successes and failures. You cultivate intelligence when you ask questions that challenge your assumptions. You refine your capability when you remain open to evolving strategies. You elevate your identity when you see yourself as a student of wealth, not just an investor. You build consistency when education fuels better decisions. You expand your future opportunities when learning uncovers new pathways. You develop wisdom when you allow information to shape your evolution. You secure your financial destiny when lifelong learning becomes your competitive edge. You complete your journey through the future-proof portfolio. Investments that win long-term when you recognize that true wealth is not built by reacting to the present, but by preparing intelligently for the future. You grow into a more capable investor when you adopt systems that thrive under uncertainty rather than collapse under pressure. You rise in long-term strength when you embrace patience over chaos and strategy over emotion. You deepen your financial identity when you prioritize durability and clarity over speculation and noise. You elevate your future when you design a portfolio that protects, adapts, and multiplies. You gain clarity when you understand that risk becomes manageable when preparation becomes routine. You sharpen your judgment when you allocate with purpose rather than impulse. You expand your resilience when you commit to building wealth across decades instead of chasing quick outcomes. You nurture your maturity when you refine your strategy as the world evolves. You strengthen your emotional stability when you trust a plan built on fundamentals rather than luck. You enhance your generational impact when you build assets that can outlast you. You cultivate wisdom when you align your portfolio with long-term global realities. You rise in conviction when every investment reflects intention and foresight. You secure your economic future when discipline becomes your greatest financial tool. And as you continue building a portfolio designed to win the long game, make sure you subscribe to Frema Audiobooks. Like this video, comment your investing vision, and share this audiobook with someone committed to building wealth that stands strong for a lifetime.